Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace, Book 1, Part 1, Chapter 6. The rustle of a woman's dress was heard in the next room. Prince Andrei shook himself as if waking up, and his face assumed the look it had had in Anna Pavlovna's drawing room. Pierre removed his feet from the sofa. The princess came in. She had changed her gown for a house dress, but it was as fresh and elegant as the other. Prince Andrei rose and politely placed a chair for her. "How is it," she began as usual in French, settling down briskly and fussily in the easy chair. "How is it Annette never got married? How stupid you men all are not to have married her! You must excuse me for saying so, but you have no sense about women. What an argumentative fellow you are, Monsieur Pierre. And I am still arguing with your husband. I can't understand why he wants to go to the war," replied Pierre, addressing the princess with none of the embarrassment so commonly shown by young men in their intercourse with young women. The princess started. Evidently, Pierre's words touched her to the quick. "Ah, that is just what I'd tell him," said she. "I don't understand it. I don't in the least understand why men can't live without wars. How is it that we women don't want anything of the kind, don't need it? Now you shall judge between us. I always tell him, here he is uncle's aide-de-camp, a most brilliant position. He is so well known, so much appreciated by everyone. The other day at the Apraskins, I heard a lady asking, 'C'est ça le fameux Prince Andrei?' Ma parole d'honneur." She laughed. "He is so well received everywhere. He might easily become aide-de-camp to the emperor. You know the emperor spoke to him most graciously. Annette and I were speaking of how to arrange it. What do you think?" Pierre looked at his friend and, noticing that he did not like the conversation, gave no reply. "When are you starting?" he asked. "Ah, ne me parlez pas de cet départ. Ne m'en parlez pas. Je ne veux pas entendre parler," said the princess in the same capriciously playful tone in which she had spoken to Hippolyte in the drawing-room, and which was so plainly ill-suited to the family circle of which Pierre was almost a member. "Today, when I remember that all these delightful associations must be broken off, and then you know, Andrei," she winked significantly at her husband. "J'ai peur, j'ai peur," she whispered, and a shudder ran down her back. Her husband looked at her as if surprised to notice that someone besides Pierre and himself was in the room, and addressed her in a tone of frigid politeness. "What is it you are afraid of, Liza? I don't understand," said he. "There, what egotists men all are. All egotists. Just for a whim of his own, goodness only knows why, he leaves me and locks me up alone in the country. With my father and sister, remember?" said Prince Andrei gently. "Alone all the same, without my friends, and he expects me not to be afraid." Her tone was now querulous, and her lip drawn up, giving her not a joyful but an animal, squirrel-like expression. She paused as if she felt it indecorous to speak of her pregnancy before Pierre, though the gist of the matter lay in that. "I still can't understand de quoi vous avez peur," said Prince Andrei slowly, not taking his eyes off his wife. The princess blushed and raised her arms with a gesture of despair. "Non, André, je dis que vous avez tellement changé." "Your doctor tells you to go to bed earlier," said Prince Andrei. "You had better go." The princess said nothing, but suddenly her short downy lip quivered. Prince Andrei rose, shrugged his shoulders, and walked about the room. Pierre looked over his spectacles with naive surprise, now at him and now at her, moved as if about to rise too, but changed his mind. "Why should I mind Monsieur Pierre being here?" exclaimed the little princess suddenly, her pretty face all at once distorted by a tearful grimace. "I have long wanted to ask you, Andrei, why you have changed so to me. What have I done to you? You are going to the war, and have no pity for me. Why is it?" "Lise," was all Prince Andrei said, but that one word expressed an entreaty, a threat. and above all conviction that she would herself regret her words. But she went on hurriedly. "You treat me like an invalid or a child. I see it all. Did you behave like that 6 months ago?" "Lise, I beg you to desist," said Prince Andrei still more emphatically. Pierre, who had been growing more and more agitated as he listened to all this, rose and approached the princess. He seemed unable to bear the sight of tears and was ready to cry himself. "Calm yourself, princess. It seems so to you because, I assure you, I myself have experienced, and so, because... No, excuse me, an outsider is out of place here. No, don't distress yourself. Goodbye." Prince Andrei caught him by the hand. "No, wait, Pierre. The princess is too kind to wish to deprive me of the pleasure of spending the evening with you." "No, he thinks only of himself," muttered the princess without restraining her angry tears. "Lise!" said Prince Andrei dryly, raising his voice to the pitch which indicates that patience is exhausted. Suddenly the angry, squirrel-like expression of the princess's pretty face changed into a winning and piteous look of fear. Her beautiful eyes glanced askance at her husband's face, and her own assumed the timid, deprecating expression of a dog when it rapidly but feebly wags its drooping tail. Mon Dieu," she muttered, and lifting her dress with one hand, she went up to her husband and kissed him on the forehead. "Bonsoir, Lise," said he, rising and courteously kissing her hand as he would have done to a stranger. The friends were silent. Neither wanted to be the first to speak. Pierre continually glanced at Prince Andrei. Prince Andrei rubbed his forehead with his small hand. "Let us go and have supper," he said with a sigh, going to the door. They entered the elegant, newly decorated and luxurious dining room. Everything from the table napkins to the silver, china, and glass bore that imprint of newness found in the households of the newly married. Halfway through supper, Prince Andrew leant his elbows on the table, and with a look of nervous agitation such as Pierre had never before seen on his face, began to talk, as one who has long had something on his mind and suddenly determines to speak out. "Never, never marry, my dear fellow. That's my advice. Never marry until you can say to yourself that you have done all you are capable of, and until you have ceased to love the woman of your choice and have seen her plainly as she is. Or else you will make a cruel and irrevocable mistake. Marry when you are old and good for nothing, or all that is good and noble in you will be lost. It will all be wasted on trifles. Yes. Don't look at me with such surprise. If you marry expecting anything from yourself in the future, you will feel at every step that for you all is ended. All is closed except the drawing room, where you will be ranged side by side with a court lackey and an idiot. But what's the good?" And he waved his arm. Pierre took off his spectacles, which made his face seem different, and the good-natured expression still more apparent, and gazed at his friend in amazement. "My wife," continued Prince Andrei, "is an excellent woman, one of those rare women with whom a man's honor is safe. But, oh God, what would I not give now to be unmarried? You are the first and only one to whom I mention this, because I like you." As he said this, Prince Andrei was less than ever like that Bolkonsky, who had lolled in Anna Pavlovna's easy chairs and with half-closed eyes had uttered French phrases between his teeth. Every muscle of his thin face was now quivering with nervous excitement. His eyes, in which the fire of life had seemed extinguished, now flashed with brilliant light. It was evident that the more lifeless he seemed at ordinary times, the more impassioned he became in these moments of almost morbid irritation. "You don't understand why I say this," he continued. "But it is the whole story of life. You talk of Bonaparte and his career," said he, though Pierre had not mentioned Bonaparte. "But Bonaparte, when he went step by step towards his goal. He was free, he had nothing but his aim to consider, and he reached it. But tie yourself up with a woman, and like a chained convict, you lose all freedom. And all you have of hope and strength merely weighs you down and torments you with regret. Drawing rooms, gossip, balls, vanity, and triviality. These are the enchanted circle I cannot escape from. I am now going to the war, the greatest war there ever was, and I know nothing and am fit for nothing. Je suis très aimable et très caustique, continued Prince Andrei. And at Anna Pavlovna's, they listened to me. And that stupid set without whom my wife cannot exist, and those women, if you only knew what they are, toutes les femmes distinguées, and women in general. My father is right. Selfish, vain, stupid, trivial in everything. That's what women are when you see them in their true colors. When you meet them in society, it seems as if there were something in them, but there's nothing. 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 No. Don't marry, my dear fellow. Don't marry, concluded Prince Andrei. It seems funny to me, said Pierre, that you should consider yourself incapable and your life a spoiled life. You have everything before you, everything, and you... He did not finish his sentence, but his tone showed how highly he thought of his friend and how much he expected of him in the future. How can he talk like that? Thought Pierre. He considered his friend a model of perfection because Prince Andrei possessed in the highest degree just the very qualities Pierre lacked, and which might be best described as strength of will. Pierre was always astonished at Prince Andrei's calm manner of treating everybody, his extraordinary memory, his extensive reading. He had read everything, knew everything, and had an opinion about everything, but above all, at his capacity for work and study. And if Pierre was often struck by Andrei's lack of capacity for philosophical meditation, to which he himself was particularly addicted, he regarded even this not as a defect, but as a sign of strength. Even in the best, most friendly and simplest relations of life, praise and commendation are essential, just as grease is necessary to wheels that they may run smoothly. Je suis un homme fini, said Prince Andrei. What's the use of talking about me? Let us talk about you, he added after a silence, smiling at his reassuring thoughts. That smile was immediately reflected on Pierre's face. But what is there to say about me? Said Pierre, his face relaxing into a careless, merry smile. What am I? Je suis un bâtard. He suddenly blushed crimson, and it was plain that he had made a great effort to say this. Sans nom, sans fortune. And it really, but he did not say what it really was. For the present I am free, and am all right, only I haven't the least idea what I am to do. I wanted to consult you seriously. Prince Andrei looked kindly at him, yet his glance, friendly and affectionate as it was, expressed a sense of his own superiority. I am fond of you, especially as you are the one live man among our whole set. Yes, you're all right. Choose what you will. It's all the same. You'll be all right anywhere. But look here. Give up visiting those Kuragins and leading that sort of life. It suits you so badly. All this debauchery, dissipation, and the rest of it. Que voulez-vous, mon cher? Answered Pierre, shrugging his shoulders. Les femmes, mon cher, les femmes. I don't understand it, replied Prince Andrei. Les femmes comme il faut. That's a different matter. But les femmes de Couragin, les femmes et le vin, I don't understand. Pierre was staying at Prince Vasily Kuragin's and sharing the dissipated life of his son Anatole, the son whom they were planning to reform by marrying him to Prince Andrei's sister. Do you know, said Pierre, as if suddenly struck by a happy thought, seriously, I have long been thinking of it. Leading such a life, I can't decide or think properly about anything. One's head aches and one spends all one's money. He asked for me tonight, but I won't go. You give me your word of honor not to go. On my honor. It was past 1 o'clock when Pierre left his friend. It was a cloudless northern summer night. Pierre took an open cab, intending to drive straight home, but the nearer he drew to the house, the more he felt the impossibility of going to sleep on such a night. It was light enough to see a long way in the deserted street, and it seemed more like morning or evening than night. On the way, Pierre remembered that Anatole Kuragin was expecting the usual set for cards that evening, after which there was generally a drinking bout, finishing with one of Pierre's favorite diversions. It would be so good to go to Kuragin's, thought he, but he immediately recalled his promise to Prince Andrei not to go there. Then, as happens to people of weak character, he desired so passionately once more to enjoy that dissipation he was so accustomed to that he decided to go. The thought immediately occurred to him that his promise to Prince Andrei was of no account, because before he gave it he had already promised Prince Anatole to come to his gathering. Besides, thought he, all such words of honor are conventional things with no definite meaning, especially if one considers that by tomorrow one may be dead, or something so extraordinary may happen to one that honor and dishonor will all be the same. Pierre often indulged in reflections of this sort, nullifying all his decisions and intentions. He went to Kuragin's. Reaching the large house near the Horse Guards barracks in which Anatole lived, Pierre entered the lighted porch, ascended the stairs, and went in at the open door. There was no one in the anteroom. Empty bottles, cloaks, and overshoes were lying about. There was a smell of alcohol and sounds of voices and shouting in the distance. Cards and supper were over, but the visitors had not yet dispersed. Pierre threw off his cloak and entered the first room, in which were the remains of supper. A footman, thinking no one saw him, was drinking on the sly what was left in the glasses. From the third room came sounds of laughter, the shouting of familiar voices, the growling of a bear, and general commotion. Some 8 or 9 young men were crowding anxiously around an open window. 3 others were romping with a young bear, one pulling him by the chain and trying to set him at the others. "I bet 100 on Stevens," shouted one. "Make sure he doesn't hold on," cried another. "I bet on Dolokhov," cried a third. "Kuragin, you part our hands." "There, leave Bruin alone. Here's a bet on." "In one gulp, or he loses," shouted a fourth. "Yakov, bring a bottle," shouted the host, a tall, handsome fellow who stood in the middle of the group without a coat and with his fine linen shirt unfastened in front. "Wait a minute, gentlemen. Here's Pierre." "Good man," cried he, addressing Pierre. Another voice from a man of medium height with clear blue eyes, particularly striking among all these drunken voices by its sober ring, cried from the window, "Come here, part the bets." This was Dolokhov, an officer of the Semyonov regiment, a notorious gambler and duelist, who was living with Anatole. Pierre smiled, looking about him merrily. "I don't understand. What's it all about?" "Wait, he's not drunk yet. A bottle here," said Anatole, and taking a glass from the table he went up to Pierre. "First of all, drink." Pierre drank one glass after another, looking from under his brows at the tipsy guests who were again crowding round the window, and listening to their chatter. Anatole kept on refilling Pierre's glass, while explaining that Dolokhov was betting with Stevens, an English naval officer, that he would drink a bottle of rum, sitting on the outer ledge of the third-floor window with his legs hanging out. "Go on, drink it all," said Anatole, giving Pierre the last glass, "or I won't let you go." "No, I won't," said Pierre, pushing Anatole aside, and he went up to the window. Dolokhov was holding the Englishman's hand and clearly and distinctly repeating the terms of the bet, addressing himself particularly to Anatole and Pierre. Dolokhov was of medium height, with curly hair and light blue eyes. He was about 25. Like all infantry officers, he wore no moustache, so that his mouth, the most striking feature of his face, was clearly seen. The lines of that mouth were remarkably finely curved. The middle of the upper lip formed a sharp wedge, and closed firmly on the firm lower one, and something like 2 distinct smiles played continually round the 2 corners of the mouth. This, together with the resolute, insolent intelligence of his eyes, produced an effect which made it impossible not to notice his face. Dolokhov was a man of small means and no connections. Yet, though Anatole spent tens of thousands of roubles, Dolokhov lived with him and had placed himself on such a footing that all who knew them, including Anatole himself, respected him more than they did Anatole. Dolokhov could play all games and nearly always won. However much he drank, he never lost his clear-headedness. Both Kuragin and Dolokhov were at that time notorious among the rowdies and carousers of Petersburg. The bottle of rum was brought. The window frame which prevented anyone from sitting on the outer sill was being forced out by two footmen who were evidently flurried and intimidated by the directions and shouts of the gentlemen around. Anatole with his swaggering air strode up to the window. He wanted to smash something. Pushing away the footman, he tugged at the frame but could not move it. He smashed a pane. "You have a try, Hercules," said he, turning to Pierre. Pierre seized the crossbeam, tugged and wrenched the oak frame out with a crash. "Take it right out. Oh, they'll think I'm holding on," said Dolokhov. "Is the Englishman bragging, eh? Is it all right?" said Anatole. "First rate," said Pierre, looking at Dolokhov, who, with a bottle of rum in his hand, was approaching the window, from which the light of the sky, the dawn, merging with the afterglow of sunset, was visible. Dolokhov, the bottle of rum still in his hand, jumped onto the windowsill. "Listen!" he cried, standing there and addressing those in the room. All were silent. "I bet 50 imperials." He spoke French that the Englishman might understand him, but he did not speak it very well. "I bet 50 imperials. Or do you wish to make it 100? Added he, addressing the Englishman. "No, 50, replied the latter. "All right, 50 imperials. That I will drink a whole bottle of rum without taking it from my mouth, sitting outside the window on this spot." He stooped and pointed to the sloping ledge outside the window. "And without holding on to anything. Is that right?" "Quite right," said the Englishman. Anatole turned to the Englishman and, taking him by one of the buttons of his coat and looking down at him, the Englishman was short, began repeating the terms of the wager to him in English. "Wait!" cried Dolokhov, hammering with the bottle on the windowsill to attract attention. "Wait a minute, Kuragin. Listen. If anyone else does the same, I will pay him 100 imperials. Do you understand?" The Englishman nodded, but gave no indication whether he intended to accept this challenge or not. Anatole did not release him, and though he kept nodding to show that he understood, Anatole went on translating Dolokhov's words into English. A thin young lad, a hussar of the lifeguards, who had been losing that evening, climbed on the windowsill, leaned over, and looked down. "Ah, oh," he muttered, looking down from the window at the stones of the pavement. "Shut up!" cried Dolokhov, pushing him away from the window. The lad jumped awkwardly back into the room, tripping over his spurs. Placing the bottle on the windowsill where he could reach it easily, Dolokhov climbed carefully and slowly through the window and lowered his legs. Pressing against both sides of the window, he adjusted himself on the seat, lowered his hands, moved a little to the right and then to the left, and took up the bottle. Anatole brought 2 candles and placed them on the windowsill, though it was already quite light. Dolokhov's back in his white shirt and his curly head were lit up from both sides. Everyone crowded to the window, the Englishman in front. Pierre stood smiling but silent. One man, older than the others present, suddenly pushed forward with a scared and angry look, and wanted to seize hold of Dolokhov's shirt. "Gentlemen, this is folly. He'll be killed, dead," said this more sensible man. Anatole stopped him. "Don't touch him. You'll startle him and then he'll be killed. Eh? What then, eh?" Dolokhov turned round and, again holding on with both hands, arranged himself on his seat. "If anyone comes meddling again," said he, emitting the words separately through his thin compressed lips, "I will throw him down there. Now then!" Saying this, he again turned round, dropped his hand, took the bottle and lifted it to his lips, threw back his head and raised his free hand to balance himself. One of the footmen who had stopped to pick up some broken glass remained in that position without taking his eyes from the window and from Dolokhov's back. Anatole stood erect with staring eyes. The Englishman looked on sideways, pursing his lips. The man who had wished to stop the affair ran to a corner of the room and threw himself on a sofa with his face to the wall. Pierre hid his face, from which a faint smile forgot to fade, though his features now expressed horror and fear. All were still. Pierre took his hand from his eyes. Dolokhov still sat in the same position, only his head was thrown further back till his curly hair touched his shirt collar, and the hand holding the bottle was lifted higher and trembled with the effort. The bottle was emptying perceptibly and rising still higher, and his head tilting yet further back. "Why is it so long?" thought Pierre. It seemed to him that more than half an hour had elapsed. Suddenly, Dolokhov made a backward movement with his spine, and his arm trembled nervously. This was sufficient to cause his whole body to slip as he sat on the sloping ledge. As he began slipping down, his head and arm wavered still more with the strain. One hand moved as if to clutch the windowsill, but refrained from touching it. Pierre again covered his eyes and thought he would never open them again. Suddenly he was aware of a stir all around. He looked up. Dolokhov was standing on the windowsill with a pale but radiant face. "It's empty!" He threw the bottle to the Englishman, who caught it neatly. Dolokhov jumped down. He smelled strongly of rum. "Well done! Fine fellow! There's a bet for you! Devil take you!" came from different sides. The Englishman took out his purse and began counting out the money. Dolokhov stood frowning and did not speak. Pierre jumped upon the windowsill. "Gentlemen, who wishes to bet with me? I'll do the same thing," he suddenly cried. "Even without a bet there. Tell them to bring me a bottle. I'll do it. Bring a bottle!" "Let him do it," said Dolokhov, smiling. "What next? Have you gone mad? No one would let you. Why, you get dizzy even on a staircase," exclaimed several voices. "I'll drink it. Let's have a bottle of rum," shouted Pierre, banging the table with a determined and drunken gesture and preparing to climb out of the window. They seized him by his arms, but he was so strong that everyone who touched him was sent flying. "No, you'll never manage him that way," said Anatole. "Wait a bit and I'll get round him. Listen, I'll take your bet tomorrow, but now we're all going to—" "Come on then," cried Pierre. "Come on, and we'll take Bruin with us." And he caught the bear, took it in his arms, lifted it from the ground, and began dancing round the room with it. This is the end of chapter 6.